Augustan Prose, Fiction and Drama. Let's begin with the Licensing Act of 1737. The Licensing Act of 1737 holds a significant place in theatrical history as a defunct Act of Parliament in the Kingdom of Great Britain. It played a crucial role in controlling and censoring the content presented in the theatre, particularly concerning political commentary on the British government. Over time, this act underwent modifications and eventually became known as the Theatres Act of 1968. One of the key provisions of the Act was the appointment of the Lord Chamberlain as the official censor responsible for overseeing theatrical performances. Additionally, it established the position of the Examiner of Plays, who worked alongside the Lord Chamberlain in the censorship process. The examiner's duties included reading all plays intended for public performance, creating synopses, and providing recommendations for licensing. In cases where there was uncertainty, the examiner consulted with the Lord Chamberlain for guidance. The roots of theatrical censorship in England date back to the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, with the Master of the Revels assuming the role of censor. This authority primarily focused on political and religious matters, including issues of blasphemy. Prominent figures like Edmund Tylney, who served as a Master of the Revels from 1579 to 1610, and his successor, George Buck, exercised their power to censor both plays intended for performance and those meant for publication. However, with the outbreak of the English Civil War in 1642, stage plays were prohibited and the role of the Master of the Revels in censorship waned. It was not until the Restoration 1660 that stage plays returned to England. Notably, during the creation of the Licensing Act of 1737, Robert Walpole held the position of Master of the Revels, adding a political dimension to the Act's implementation. Clubs and Coffeehouses. Coffee houses in the 18th century served as vibrant hubs for discussion and socialization, often attracting famous poets and writers who contributed to their popularity. For instance, Lloyd's of London, depicted in the first image, is reminiscent of coffee houses like Will's, frequented by renowned English poet John Dryden. These establishments facilitated conversations on a wide range of topics, although they could occasionally turn raucous due to the availability of alcohol. Many poets, including Alexander Pope, claimed the inspiration from the lively coffeehouse culture, with Pope's famous work, The Rape of the Lock, said to be influenced by the gossip and discussions overheard in these venues. Scriblerus Club. The Scriblerus Club was an informal gathering of prominent authors in 18th century London during the Augustan Age of English literature. The core members of the club included satirical giants like Jonathan Swift and Alexander Pope, along with John Gay, John Arbuthnot, Henry St. John, and Thomas Parnell. Formed in 1714, the club's influence endured until the death of its founding members in 1745. Jonathan Swift and Alexander Pope, in particular, left a lasting impact on literature through their collaborative efforts within the group. The club's inception aimed to satirize various abuses of learning and knowledge, a mission reflected in the memoirs of Martinus Scriblerus. Some of their satirical works, attributed to the fictional persona, Martinus Scriblerus, were not published until the 1740s. Although Robert Harley, 1st Earl of Oxford, and Mortimer occasionally joined meetings, they did not significantly contribute to the literary output. However, Henry St. John, 1st Viscount Bolingbroke, did contribute to the club's literary productions. The club's collective efforts led to the creation of works like the second edition of Pope's The Dunciad, which featured contributions attributed to Martinus Scriblerus. Richard Owen Cambridge penned the mock epic poem The Scribleriad, with Martinus Scriblerus as the central character. Additionally, Henry Fielding paid homage to the Scriblerians in his play, The Welsh Opera, using the pen name Scriblerus Secundus. Kit Kat Club. The Kit Kat Club, established in early 18th century London, was a prominent social and literary club known for its strong political affiliations with the Whig Party. The club meetings initially took place at a tavern run by Christopher Cat, who lent his name to the mutton pies called Kit Kats that became associated with the club. Later, the club relocated to various venues, including the Fountain Tavern on the Strand and a custom-built room at Barn Elms, the home of the club's secretary, Jacob Tonson. During the summer months, the club gathered at the Upper Flask on Hampstead Heath. Distinguished members of the Kit Kat Club included notable writers such as William Congreve, John Locke, Sir John Vanbrugh, and Joseph Addison. The club also boasted influential political figures like the Duke of Somerset, the Earl of Burlington, the Duke of Newcastle upon Tyne, the Earl of Stanhope, Viscount Cobham, Abraham Stanion, and Sir Robert Walpole among its ranks. The Age of Prose and Reason. The 18th century, often referred to as the Age of Prose and Reason, earned this designation due to the notable absence of significant poetry during that era. Poetry, which had once been a vibrant form of expression, had become somewhat prosaic during this period. The 18th century is also known as the Augustan Age or Neoclassical Age. It marked a shift towards Enlightenment values, emphasizing reason over superstition and science over blind faith. This transformation represented a departure from the prevailing belief that knowledge should be derived from scripture or religious authorities. While it is tempting to make sweeping generalizations about the 18th century, it's important to recognize that it did not have a clear separation from the 17th century. Many ideas from the late 17th century continued into the 18th century. The reaction against Elizabethan Romanticism, which began in the 17th century with figures like Denham, Waller, and Dryden, culminated in the so-called Age of Prose and Reason, as described by Matthew Arnold. In this period, writers like Alexander Pope and his contemporaries placed a significant emphasis on reason in their writing and thinking. Reason could manifest itself in various forms, including good sense, rationalism, wit, intellect, and dry logicism. It stood in opposition to excessive emotionalism, sentimentalism, extravagance, eccentricity, and a lack of realism or imagination. Reason became a central tenet of the era, and writers like Swift, Pope, and Dr. Johnson celebrated it in both their literary works and critical writings. Swift, for instance, satirized the lack of reason and common sense in human beings through his portrayal of yahoos in Gulliver's Travels, contrasting them with the rational and sensible humanims. This satire highlighted the human deficiency in good sense and reason. The 18th century was characterized by satire, didacticism, and critical thinking, which were rooted in reason and intellect. Religion was not exempt from the influence of reason during this era. Religious instructors appealed to the conscience and reasoning of their audiences, aligning with the broader trend of emphasizing rationality. The 18th century is often described as the age of understanding and enlightenment, with literature playing a pivotal role in disseminating knowledge to the growing public. Reason reigned supreme, and there was a prevailing belief in the progress of the human mind. This period witnessed the flourishing of enlightened ideas and the triumph of English prose, earning it the title of the Age of Prose Reason. Prominent prose writers of the age included Jonathan Swift, Joseph Addison, Richard Steele, and Samuel Johnson. Others of significance included James Boswell, Edmund Burke, and Edward Gibbon. These writers contributed to the era's rich literary landscape, characterized by its commitment to reason and rationality.